Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin, differentiating market cycles. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. One of the most common questions I get is how do you differentiate market cycles? And honestly, there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it. While it makes sense to try to be objective about everything, there's really no clear cut way that we could distinguish between one cycle or another without somehow introducing some level of subjectivity. With that said, we can look at phases or times in Bitcoin's history where it's generally trending up versus generally trending down. Now, over Bitcoin's entire history, it generally trends up. Okay, and this is probably best shown with our trusty logarithmic regression bands for Bitcoin. Okay, so while Bitcoin trends up at some phases and down at other phases, it is still generally trending up over the macro scale. So that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. And because of this, it makes an ecosystem, an entire asset class of other cryptocurrencies also have phases where they do really, really well and people make a lot of money. People also lose a lot of money when Bitcoin goes down and altcoins get completely wrecked. Might be worthwhile to somewhat investigate what differentiates one market cycle from another. One popular question I've seen recently is, well, what if 64K was the market cycle top? Okay, so I think that, again, you guys know it, right? I'm sure I'm a broken record. I think we're going to have lengthening cycles and diminishing returns. Okay, you could argue, you could easily make the case that those two are not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? You could have diminishing returns without lengthening cycles. You could have lengthening cycles without diminishing returns. You could have neither, or you could have both. For instance, let me just make what my model is saying. What I want to make it clear what I believe my model suggests. So, for instance, if this ends up being the market cycle peak, if that ends up being the market cycle peak, and we do not put any new all-time highs in for say 3 years or something, then we would have had diminishing returns, but we would not have had lengthening cycles. Okay, so that would be option one. If this is not the market cycle peak and we go back up in say late 2021 and go up to here, and then come back down, and that ends up being the market cycle peak, then we would have had diminishing returns still, because in order for us to not have diminishing returns, we need to go to like $250,000 to $300,000. If we only go to say 100K or 120K, we would not have had we would have had diminishing returns, but we would not have had lengthened cycles. So that's two of them. The other one being, well, let's say we come down or hold the line here, and then we end up putting in a new all-time high in say early 2023 or something. We could have, that would be definitely a lengthened cycle, and depending on where it peaks, either diminishing returns if it's below those prior price estimates, or non-diminishing returns if it goes above them. But then it begs the question: how do you distinguish between one cycle and another, right? How do you say it's a lengthened cycle, or how do you just say it's a new cycle? Well, in the past, I felt like it was a bit more obvious. I still think it's somewhat obvious, but like if you just sort of generally follow the run, right? You follow what Bitcoin was doing. It was just absolutely going crazy here, and we ultimately broke through this prior bull run support imaginary line. We had to consolidate for a while. Okay, we had to consolidate for a while, and it took us a long time before we put in new all-time highs relative to the time. Now, with lengthening cycles in mind, this makes sense. If you think of it as a 4-year cycle, then this period maybe you would just combine with the next one. Okay. If you go to the next cycle and you say, okay, well, this is generally when things started moving up, you could maybe argue that this was the next run. And then once we broke down below this, it was definitively over. We were trending sideways for a long time. We did not immediately put in new all-time highs. This one here, we came down, but we pretty quickly went back up. It's not like we came up here, we came back down. It's not like we came back down to some of these levels over here, trended sideways for a year, and then came back up. Okay, if we had done that, then I think that would have been one cycle. But because we were able to recover and sort of continue on our well above our prior bull market trend line here, we ended up breaking it here, and then this would have been the key accumulation phase for the next cycle. Okay, again, this is somewhat subjective. I'm not trying to say that it's objective in any way, shape, or form. I just see the question a lot. Now, the next cycle, if we say look at where the bull market really kicked off, we could say it kicked off here, more or less, right? I mean, it's hard to draw these perfectly, anyways, but you could say it more or less started here, and it would have been interesting, if you were around crypto back in 2018, there were a lot of people, a non-negligible amount of people who were saying that we were going to have something similar to 2013, where we were going to come down and then go back up, okay? And if we had done that, then that would have probably, in my opinion, it would have been part of the same cycle, okay? It would have been part of the same cycle. But it wasn't, right? We ended up coming down, we broke below, we ended up trending sideways for 2 or 3 years before putting in a new all-time high, okay? We did not immediately go back up. So now, when we look at the current cycle, and we look at, we had our bottom over here. If we sort of draw a line connecting the dots more or less, we did have the pandemic drop. Okay, so you could argue that shouldn't be included and maybe draw it slightly steeper. But one of the things you'll notice is they're steeper. It's steeper over here. So the first one is the steepest climb. The next one is not as steep. This one's not as steep. This one's not as steep as well. So I think the general implication for the market cycle and when we could differentiate between, say, this market cycle and a new one would be, well, if the price of Bitcoin just goes down, let's suppose that it just goes down for a few months and then we go a couple years without putting in a new all-time high. Okay, so let's say we come down and we break below the trend line and we just do something over here and we're still trading, well below 60K by 2023, then I think we would obviously look back at this cycle and say that was the market cycle peak. Okay, I'm trying to be, trying to communicate where I would draw the line between claiming victory on the lengthening cycle model and saying, okay, maybe it didn't work out, right? So that is what I'm trying to provide some level of transparency on. Alternatively, if we still have some room. I feel like we even still have some room here. We could come down even more as long as we're putting in new all-time highs. Like if we're putting in new all-time highs and just shooting through, shooting back up, going into say late 2022, even into 2023, then I think we could look at this model and say that, it is a lengthened cycle. Okay, like I feel like we could look at this model and say it is a lengthened cycle if in fact we don't go back into this area down here where we're just trending sideways for 2 years, like we did over here. Okay, so that I think would sort of differentiate between a lengthened cycle versus, say, a shorter cycle and then a longer accumulation phase before another move, and just simply a lengthened cycle. So again, what I think, just to be clear, is that I think that we will have a lengthened cycle and diminishing returns. And therefore there is some flexibility on exactly how we could see that transpire. For instance, if we did it similar to 2013, maybe we do something like this, and then I don't think it would go up to those prices, but we could do something like this. Maybe we go up to 180 or something. I don't know, somewhere between 1 to 200K, and then we come back down, and then we really go through some long accumulation phase again. Okay, maybe not that low. But I would suspect 40 to 50K is my guess by the next halving if it were to play out something like that. Okay, so when I look at this model, I say I think in order to make claims on whether this is in fact the market cycle top, we actually just need more time, and that's basically been what we've said for the last 2 years, whether it be the 4-year cycle model, the stock to flow model. They're all decent models that are worth our time and attention But in order to actually know which one will stand the test of time in the best manner, we simply do need time to then retroactively look back and see which one held up the best. I've told you guys before, my guess is that, I believe in the lengthening cycle model, but my guess is at the end of the day, there's not going to be a single model that can completely claim victory, as there's going to be constant caveats in the interpretation of those models. For instance, there's probably some people that even if Bitcoin did go back up in 2022, like let's suppose it did something like this, and then it came back up in 2022, there's probably some that would just assume that this is a new cycle. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of subjectivity when it comes to defining a market cycle. For me, I'm generally looking at a longer momentum shift in the market. This was a longer momentum shift in the market because we trended down for a year, we trended sideways for a year, and then finally we went back up. That was a key momentum shift in the market. And we also, sort of broke through the prior line in the sand that we had been building on. Once we broke through the prior line in the sand that we had been building on, this was down in the dumps, accumulation phase for a couple more years before putting in a new all-time high. Right now, it's way too early to call that the market cycle top. Way too early to call. And I do think that we will go back above this line. I do think we will go back above it. Not necessarily in 2021, but I don't think we have to wait until 2025 or something, or even late 2024. Like, I don't think we have to wait until after the next halving to go above it. So I just wanted to clear my thoughts about, where I see the market going. I think it's going to generally trend up. Right now, obviously, things are a bit bearish. Market can always, the sentiment in the market can always change on a dime. I would just contend that we're nowhere close to being at the point where we could definitively say that that's the market cycle top. And if the argument or if the debate then changes between, say, shortening cycles and lengthening cycles, then again, the main thing that we need to elucidate the truth is time. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember, we have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com if you want to know how I'm navigating these markets, okay? And on the premium list, we have the risk dashboard, which is what I use to trade. We have weekly reports. We have 2 weekly premium videos. We have an Into the Cryptoverse app. We have trading view indicators that you get. We have Telegram alerts channel, Telegram chat room. We have a lot of stuff for it. You can always just try it out for 1 month. If it's not your thing, you can cancel. But I would encourage you guys to check it out. The risk metric, I think, is probably the biggest thing on it. Because it did show Bitcoin going back to the 0.9 to 1 risk band, which we warned about in previous years, generally signifies at the very least a local top, okay, a local top. And we hit that up in this region up here, okay? So anyways, make sure you guys subscribe at the very least. Let's go for 500,000 subscribers. Click the bell icon to turn on notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.